Morning everyone, welcome back. Well, I've received a few pond plants for the wildlife pond, so I'm going to start planting up. Even though the water's a bit low at the moment, I still think it's damp enough around the edges to plant up some marginal plants. So I'll show you what I've got so far and we'll get started on planting up. So first of all, I've got greater bird's foot trefoil there. Then I've got water figwort there. And then I've got two sets of purple loosestrife. So I've placed the plants and now I'm going to dig a small hole with my hands. It'll be a bit muddy, but that's fine. And then I'll put the plants in. That's the figwort in. That's gone in quite well. It's very damp there, so that's good. Well, would you believe it? I've just finished planting up that first figwort plant over there. And someone came along and gave me this plant here, which is a pond plant. They didn't know what it is, and I've just looked it up. I think it's marsh marigold. So the marsh marigold that I got donated, I'm not sure whether it's going to take over the pond or not, but anyway, I've divided that clump into 4 smaller pieces and I've planted it in several different places around the pond. So purple loosestrife, I've got one this side of the pond and I planted it right near the pond edge here. I've got one the other side of the pond over there, planted up on that bank. The greater bird's foot trefoil I've planted over this side of the beach, high up, so it got damp feet but not totally sogging wet through. I've placed this curved piece of wood, old gnarly bit of wood, hanging over the pond, and meant to be for like dragonflies and damselflies to rest on, but I've been resting it under some blocks of concrete. But now, as I've just planted some of the plants, I'm going to take the concrete away and I'm going to dig a trench and bury it in the soil just behind the pond liner edge, and then it will hang hopefully a bit closer to the surface of the water. Well, there we go, that's the first day's planting done, and I managed to get 8 plants in the pond edge today, even though I only came with 4. Also managed to get buried in the soil over here that curved piece of gnarled wood, and I buried it under the pathway here, and so that's lower to the pond surface, and especially when the pond gets fuller, as no doubt it will, the pond edge is actually buried around here, so the water, there's potential for it to come right up to here, so that will be a lot closer. And I've also placed in the edges of the pond these bits of bark, tree bark, thick bark that I found, and that's going to create some shade for any frogs, toads, little wildlife, anything, newts, whatever, when it's hot and sunny. Right, I've got some very exciting news. I've just had a delivery of 5 Ramshorn snails from the wildyourgarden.com website, and today I'm going to put them in straight into the pond. In fact, they've just been delivered this morning and they're going straight into the pond now, and apparently they hibernate when they're in transit, so I'm getting them in the pond as quickly as I can, and then I'm going to hopefully put them into the middle and they'll find their way around and wake up and get to work on the algae. They're in this little container, you can see there. There's 5 of them there, and you can see that very well. And I'm going to place them into the middle of the pond. Okay, that's just had an air bubble in there. So I hope you got that on camera. They're now in there, all 5 of them. They look really good. Fingers crossed they'll start doing their thing. There's plenty of places for them to hide. So little nooks and crannies. Don't forget the well in the middle of the pond is 3 foot deep. So they should be able to find lots of little places to hide so that they can't get eaten by birds. It's been a couple of days since I planted those 8 small pond plants, and yesterday the rest of the plants arrived in the post, along with those lovely Ramshorn snails. So I'm going to open the box, do a quick check, and then we'll get ready for planting. Well, there we go. I've got 15 additional pond plants to plant up today. I'm just going to run through the names. I'm not very familiar with these. It's my first wildlife pond, but I know roughly where they're going to go. I've made a plan, but let's run through them quickly. I've got 3 cuckoo flower plants there, 3 hard rush. I know they're for planting in the water, so little things can crawl up and come out of their hiding places. And 3 water forget-me-nots, 1 brook lime, 3 upright water milfoil. Again, little insects and things can climb up out of the water with those, I know that. I've got 1 fringed water lily, which would be nice, and 1 water plantain. Again, I think they're more upright, the plantain, and they can be used to climb up out of the water. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place the additional plants in the rough area of where I think I'd like to put them. And then some of them will go deeper towards the middle, others will be around the edge. So I've got the plants in roughly where I think they'll be best placed. I'm going to go in a little bit closer now and explain to you a bit more about each plant and roughly sort of what zone of planting it's going to go in, and if I can remember what the role of the plant is. So that one's your upright water milfoil. There's 3 of those, and they're going to go in the less wet area of the pond, sort of around the edges where it's damp. So this is the cuckoo flower. I've got 3 of those, and they're going to go in the wet but less damp area of the pond, sort of around the upper edges. Already got some lovely white flowers on. So I've got 3 of these hard rush plants. They're going to be placed lower down in the water at the emergent level. So I've placed the water forget-me-not. I've got 3 of those into the sort of less wet, more damp area of the edges of the pond edge. And that's what I'm calling zone 3, marginals. Now I've got 2 plants there which I'm going to plant submerged in the water. The fringed water lily on the right, that's going to be planted inside the well on a shelf just down below these rocks you can see on the surface. And hopefully that will grow and cover quite a lot of the area of the pond to create shade. So that plant there is water plantain, and that's going to be submerged roughly where it is now, so that again insects, larvae and sort of dragonflies can emerge and climb up out of there. That's an upright plant in the emergent sort of area. So I'm going to get started on planting now, and I'll crack on. I'll probably put you on a bit of time lapse actually. That's all the pond plants in the various different depths. You can just about see that water lily at the moment on the 2nd level down in the deepest part of the pond on a little shelf. Okay, so the next job is to plant up the left-hand side here of the pond. So I've got some pond edge seeds here, some from Chiltern Seeds and some from Sutton Seeds. I'm going to plant those along nearer the edge of the pond, just there. And I've got some wildflower meadow seeds which I'm going to be planting sort of more towards the back area along the pathway and around the rear edges of the pond. I've got some red clover, oxeye daisy, red rescue and some bird's foot trefoil. I'm going to mix these up anyway. I'm going to distribute them along the back, but first of all I'm going to give this area a nice little rake over. It's very dry. We haven't had any rain for at least 3 weeks, I think, here in the northeast of London. I'm just going to leave this quite rough. That's the sum total of my pond edge seeds there. There we go, there's my wildflower meadow mix. There's quite a lot of that. I'm not going to go too crazy near the edges of the pond because I know it's going to be a lot taller. So I'm going to go towards the outer perimeter of the pond area, sort of along there, and then along this perimeter here. I think this is going to provide a little bit of cover, hopefully, for some of the birds. I'm going to give the outer perimeter of the pond a watering now, which was all the way along here, I believe, before I give it a raking over. I've really enjoyed that planting up process, which was the most enjoyable stage of the whole thing, I think. That and seeing the water, obviously. So I've got my wildflower meadow seeds sprinkled on the far reaches around the pond, near the middle of the pond, but still on the edges. I've got the pond edge mix sprinkled in, and then I've got the plants that go at different planting depths and different zones in the wildlife pond itself. So I've really enjoyed that, but overall I think the whole process of making a wildlife pond, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and what better place to do it on than an allotment plot. For me, I was going for a natural sort of pond edge finish, like a riverbed, no plastic showing, and this method of putting pond liner over a fleece and then a fleece on top of that, fleece liner fleece, and then the subsoil, I think is absolutely superb, because these plants have gone straight into the subsoil and the water will clean very quickly and drop down again. The sediment will clean and sort itself out. So yeah, I'm very pleased with that. I'd like to give a massive thank you to Joel Ashton and his team over at wildergarden.com, and they've given me lots of advice and also provided these plants which are purchased via their website. I'd thoroughly recommend watching Joel Ashton's 3-part series on how to create a wildlife pond, and lots of the other videos he's done. He's a real inspiration and a really top guy, and I really appreciate the support he's given and the encouragement he's given me over the time I've been doing this. So I think over the next few weeks the pond will gradually fill up a bit more, and I hope we'll see these plants sort of establishing themselves and thriving and bringing more wildlife and pollinators onto the pond and creating a lovely habitat, and not least to do some pollinating on my annuals and perennial vegetables further down the plot. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks very much for joining me on the wildlife allotment plot, and stick around to the end because I've got a couple of special guests who I'm sure you're going to want to see. Take care guys, bye.